Well, good morning. My name is Brent White, and I am your Elementary Education Associate at the State Department of Education. I have now, I think, crossed the 2-year threshold. So I've been at the State Department for officially 2 years now, which is crazy to think about because I can does not seem like it's been 2 years. Um, so I'm joined by Emily Elliott. She's going to be my co-host and my wing person for today. So she'll be monitoring the chat, dropping links, telling me if you can't see anything. Again, you should be seeing my screen right now about increasing student engagement. Perfect, awesome. Um, and so just a little bit of background for me again. My 2 years, I'm in the Office of Assessment and Standards. And so we are actually getting ready to move into our new building tomorrow. They're off of 26 at the State Farmers Market. So that's exciting. And I taught sixth grade science for about 15 years. And I taught in school district, Lexington School District 5, which is the Northwest Columbia area, Irmo, Chapin. And I taught it in all sixth grade school for the majority of that time. So we had close to 1,000 sixth graders in one building, which is probably something that you don't want to imagine for too long. But it was really great opportunity. We did single gender classes for a while, and it was a great introduction to the second half of their education. So we had 10 elementary schools that fed into us, and then they went off to two separate middle schools for seventh and eighth, and then the so again, Emily's going to be my wing person. If you have any questions for her, you can drop them in the chat. She'll be monitoring the chat, dropping links. And Emily, if you'll do me a favor and drop that link again for the note catcher. And that note catcher is a forced copy Google Doc, and so it will allow you to make a copy, and then you'll have editing rights for it. We are recording today. So the goal is to get this process through closed captioning, and then allow this on our website for everyone across the state to view. So that's why we're recording, to get that up there to provide some asynchronous professional learning for the teachers across the state. All right, we're first going to go to a Jamboard and talk about how we do science. And that Jamboard is going to ask you, which student do you agree with? Which one do you agree with? And then which one your student might agree with. And so that link is coming in the chat. And I'm going to share my screen with it. And so you have, and this is on your note catcher as well. There are 3 students. They're Jimmy, Jenna, and Joe. And I want you to think about which one you agree with and why, and which one your students would agree with and why. And so Jimmy says that I think scientists just try out different things until one works. Jenna's statement, I think there is a definite set of steps all scientists follow called the scientific method. Joe says, I think scientists use different methods, but they all involve doing experiments. So if you will, on that Jamboard, tell me which one you agree with and why, and then which one your students would agree with and why. And on Jamboard, you can either come up here in the 3 dots and duplicate if you would like, and then you can make it bigger, and then edit, and you can change the color if you would like. And then slide 1 is who you agree with, and then slide 2 is which one your student might agree with and why. So go ahead and do that. If you're having difficulties navigating that, please let us know. And again, Jimmy's statement, I think scientists just try out different things until one works. Jenna states that I think there is a definite steps all scientists follow called the scientific method. And Joe says, I think scientists use different methods, but they all involve doing. I'm just going to move this Joe one over to the next slide here. And if I could get a couple people, so we have Joe and Jenna. And if I can get one person to tell me why they chose, come off mute or type in the chat of why they chose Joe or Jenna with what they agree with. Again, Jenna's statement was, I think there is a definite steps that all scientists follow called the scientific method. And Joe, I think scientists use different methods, but they all involve experience.
I picked Joe because I know that they all follow the scientific method, but I think that their methods is what I was thinking more of their thought processes and their information and how to their strategy to solve the problem would be different. Like they could have the same problem, but how they go about it would be, or their reasoning for solving it would be different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the way with our students too, right? They all bring different approaches and different perspectives to solving of how to solve a problem. My brother owns his own video production company. And I always say that his brain works a little bit more artsy and creative side than mine does. So he's going to solve a problem maybe a little bit differently than my kind of more math and science type brain. So you might have some different perspectives of everything. And again, so your students, they're going to have different ways of thinking. And that's great to explore that. Like, I never thought of it that way. In the chat, Heather says, I'm all about the steps. That's why I agree with the scientific method. Okay. So there are an agreed upon with all science and agreed upon you have to take certain steps. Right? And we want those steps to be we have to follow those steps because again we want our experiment to be duplicated, right? Without any, it should be able to be redone, and get similar results. And so having there are certain steps that you have to follow. And so that's something that can be, agreed upon by everybody that there are certain steps that you would have to follow. And again, as we're going to talk about today, maybe allowing for students to produce that procedure of what steps that they followed. Kind of just take a little bit out and have them come up with their steps and see if they can, then swap paper and see if the other group can do their experiment based on their steps. It would be really fun. And anybody else want to share about Jenna or Joe or Jimmy about which one they agree with? I appreciate the participation on that. Let's look at what your students might agree with. And either come off mute or type in the chat. Which one would your students agree with? Jimmy, Jenna, or Joe? And
For my students, I said Jimmy because I work with the younger population and it's still, I think they're in awe of the phenomenon. They don't understand the reasoning behind it. They just know that we're doing something that is interactive and fun.
yeah. And I love hearing that you're doing the interactive part at the younger age. Okay, that is great. Okay. And so and kids are naturally curious. So they might not know the why behind it, but they're like, we want to find this out. We don't know maybe how to do it, the why behind it. But we're doing something, we're engaging them in science at the younger ages, which is excellent. Heather says in the chat, students think science is all experiments, okay? Or at least in middle school they do. Absolutely, they think about um, doing back to actually doing the experiments. Okay? And in all actuality, that is a very limited part of science in the real world. A lot of scientists, the biggest thing that a lot of scientists do is they read, they obtain, evaluate, and communicate information. They read okay? Because they want to know, okay, what research maybe happened before that I can build on, okay? And then if I do come, get results, I want to be able to communicate those out to others. And then a big part of science is peer review. So we're looking at other people's work, seeing if it's valid and they followed, procedures. And so we're evaluating work as well. So it's actually it's a great way to experiments are a great way to get students excited and engaged in science, but then use that as an opportunity to be like, this is actually a small part of what scientists actually end up doing is those experiments. And there are experiments are great, investigations are great. Coming from my sixth grade, we had again 10 elementary schools that fed into us, and so I had at one time taught 8A B days, so taught 120 kids every 2 days, and so at 120 different experiences in elementary science. And one year we started off with our energy unit, and we did lots of investigations. And a student pulled me aside and said, Mr. White, I've never done anything like this before. And I said, that's okay. You didn't have that, experience in elementary school. But I also told her, get ready. We're gonna be doing a lot of investigation. So they're coming with different experiences with science as well. Um, so sometimes they might not have that experience with investigations in elementary school, and so that's what they want to do in middle school. And it's a great way for middle school to get out that energy, get them up moving around, uh, and not, of course, sitting at that desk. Right? Yeah, getting Heather said in the chat, our kids haven't had much elementary science, and getting started to do more with them when they come to sixth grade. Absolutely. Yeah. They're telling me they want to be doing science. Like I said, kids are naturally curious. They want to investigate, they want to find out. But we just have to allow those opportunities to happen. In one place, the start is starting with integration in K through 5, just using as much integration as possible. So if they are using a literacy strategy, that they could be using that literacy strategy with some science.
Yeah, Heather, we're working really hard to change that so that students are having all kinds of science experiences in K5 so that when they come to you, they're like well-versed scientists.
Yes, I appreciate that. It's great. And so yeah, steps are being made forward with that for integration. Someone posted on X a while ago. A school was being intentional with the new ELA standards that they were going to integrate with the new science standards. Um, and so that's a great entry point for integration. And on Wednesday, we're going to talk about the cross-cutting concepts, and that's another great entry point for integration. Because the cross-cutting concept, stuff like cause and effect. Well, that happens in every like fiction story. So it's a great entry point for that integration. Yeah. And I'll be calling on Charleston County to be an exemplar and for examples. And anybody else want to speak on why they chose their students might agree with Jimmy, Jenna, or Joe? And we just have representation from all of them. Um, so students again come with their different thoughts. Okay. Okay, so next up, I'm going to start off with a pre-assessment. So Emily, if you will drop that link in the chat, and you can scan that QR code as well. So just a quick pre-assessment about your understanding of the science and engineering practices. And it's going to also ask you on there for your personal success criteria. And so that's a great place for reflection. And as we go throughout today, the goal is to make a step forward. Okay. So if we are at a 1 or a 2, which is a completely valid place to be, if I can move you up to a 3, if you're at a 2, that would be fabulous. Okay. I don't expect just within this time to go from a 1 to a 4. I'm not a miracle worker. We need more time to process and engage in the process and reflect and everything. So the goal is to hopefully make a step forward. And I'll give you some time to complete that. Again, if you have not made your copy of the note catcher, go ahead and do that as well. We got everybody. All right. And a lot of us, majority got 2, some 3s, 2s and 3s. Excellent. And again, a perfectly valid place to be. Okay. All right. Like reviewing that. Okay, so our learning targets for today. is I can explain how the SCPs are connected to student learning. We're going to work on naming, identifying and naming the SCPs. Okay. So maybe not just like recalling them, from memory, but maybe through some of the practices, through some the activities that we can be able to name some of these SCPs. And what's going to happen as well is as I go through this presentation, we're going to actually be engaged in some of the science and engineering practices. So it's kind of like a double layer um, presentation. You'll see some instructional strategies that you can use as well. And of course, um, ask questions as well if they, of what instructional strategies, what can we do for this? And, and then of course, that kind of goes along with the last one about explaining SCPs to your content with elementary and middle, and see how we can best use these science engineering practices. Also, if you have questions or anything, just feel free to use the parking lot. And if Emily, if you will drop that link in the chat, so you can have that parking lot up if you have any questions. And I'll visit that throughout our presentation today. And of course, you can just ask questions in the chat or raise your hand as well. But if you feel like you don't want to have the spotlight on you and want to ask that question anonymously, you can do that in the parking lot. And again, I'm super casual. Emily is going to be monitoring the chat and everything. So if something comes up, please let me know and let her know as well. Okay, what I'd first like you to do on your note catcher, okay, you have on page 2, you have the list of the science and engineering practices. And if you will, just take a moment and look at those practices and kind of give me some like keywords, thoughts about what you think that practice is mostly about. Just like keywords, phrases. You can use sentences if that works for you. And I'll give you some time to do that. Again, there'll be 8 of them, and I think it goes down on the 3rd page for the other 2. So what do you think this practice is mostly about? Give you a couple more minutes to fill that out again. Fill in a keyword or phrase for each practice. I understand that I probably did not give you enough time. But what we're gonna do, I'm asking you to respond to the chat. And we're gonna use something that's called the waterfall protocol. So this waterfall protocol, what I'm gonna have you do is just type in your response in the chat, but do not hit enter until I count you down. And then when I count you down, we'll all hit enter, and then all the responses in the chat will come in like a waterfall. Okay. So my first question I'm going to ask you is which um, which science and engineering practice did you have the most to say about, that you were kind of most confident in describing? So go ahead and type that in the chat, but do not hit enter. And if you have two of them, you can put two of them. Which science engineering practice did you have the most to say about, or the one that you already feel the most confident about? Like, I do a great job of this one. And again, if it's two, you can choose two. And I'm going to count you in. I'll count down from 5, and then you'll hit enter. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Engage your argument from evidence. You put the numbers, and I appreciate that. I did not give good clarity on that. So number 4 was analyzing and interpreting data. Good. And number 2, developing and using models. Excellent. And if someone wants to share about how they use that science engineering practice that they like, and Scott said, asking questions and assigning problems for his. You can type in the chat or come up to me if you want to share just like what you like it like what you do with that practice that is really engaging for students. And Lindsay said 4, analyzing and interpreting data. Good.
So I said 7, engaging in argument from evidence, because I think this is one when we're talking about integrating with different that's funny, Lindsay, with different especially with literacy. I know there's a big emphasis in our ELA standards on being able to support your claim with evidence, and also claim evidence reasoning is something that my colleague Amy and I have worked really hard on helping teachers to embrace with our new standards. So that's why I chose that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I almost wish it said engaging in scientific argument from evidence. Just some students are going to say like, oh yeah, I get to argue, and but engaging in scientific argument and doing claim evidence reasoning CERs with that is great. Great strategy. And you also hit it with integration with the ELA standard. Okay? You're making this claim about, an ELA, like why a character is the way they are, based on this, and you're making a claim in science, like, okay, this is what is happening. Here's my evidence. Kind of like having that text to back up in an ELA. Okay. Yeah, then Heather, in middle school, you have to provide models and multiple examples to teach all kids. Use the ideas all the time to help students engage and buy in with that. I love that. Yeah. And using multiple types of models are perfect. Right? So when you look at a picture, let's say the water cycle. Okay. Evaporation and transpiration is not always going to be on the right hand side. And so having them exposure to different models, what different models could look like, um, and know that their models can be revisable. So they're not just stuck with that model and that's it. It's a great way for a great pre-assessment to have them draw models and to use those models and then give some instruction, and then they can go back and revise those models. And then allowing, time for your feedback on those models. Okay. You can use a protocol like warm and cool feedback, providing feedback on that model, and make sure because that model is a way to communicate your understanding. Um, and also expanding of what our idea of a model is. So we often kind of think just that three-dimensional or two-dimensional, like a drawing and labeling. So a mathematical equation is a model, an algorithm is a model, a graph is a model, a chart is a model. So expanding kind of what that idea of a model, of what a model is, okay, is really important. Excellent. And now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to use the waterfall protocol again. But this time, I'm going to ask you to put in the one that you had the least to say about, or that you are least confident in. So give some time to think about that. Again, you put your response in the chat, but do not hit enter. And you can put the number or type out the whole science and engineering practice. And I'll count you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Number 5, using mathematical and computational thinking. Yes. Yeah, that one is hard. Um, and I'll tell you a perfect example. So I was having students calculate averages. Like we had a data table, 3 trials, and we were taking the average. And during my first couple of classes, I was like, okay, well, it's not like resonating a lot with students. Like they're not, just like jumping on it, and everything. So I did lots of scaffolding. Um, and then, the day went on, it was kind of like still kind of like a struggle, for the students. And then I ended up talking to my math colleague, and guess what? They had not been exposed to calculating averages yet. It's like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense because I was, providing lots of scaffolding. And so I tell that story because, number one, it's important to know about, what's going on kind of in other subject areas, like where they're at, with their scope and sequence and pacing and everything. And then it'll still allow me to, you can still do that skill, but again, just plan for more time and provide for more scaffolding with it. Like you still have them calculate average, but like, hey, you haven't learned this in math yet, but it's sometimes in science we do this thing called an average, and it's also called the mean. And we're just going to do that because we just want to see the averages. Because sometimes when we do experiments, sometimes we take measurements wrong, right? And so that's why we do 3 trials and 3 or more trials, and we can average them together. And um, And so it was an eye-opening experience for me. It was like, oh, this makes perfect this makes perfect sense. And I believe this is the one of the least one assigned science and engineering practices on the the 2021 science standards document. It's the least one that is assigned for state assessment purposes. So I do think so. I'm pretty sure that's the least one of the. It's not there a lot with for state assessment purposes. Okay? Um, and number five, I was using methodical and computational thinking. And seven was off of my little diagram. If you could tell me what number seven was, was that engaging in
Yep.
argument for evidence. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Um, so again, scientific argument. But again, having them choose a position, right? Which is kind of hard for a lot of kids because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be the only person that chose one way, and that peer pressure of that. So just engaging them and providing that atmosphere, like, hey, you can choose something that's wrong, and you can and as long as you are defending your answer, you're right. I mean, you can be using evidence and defending your claim, okay, based on evidence. So again, just really in using that evidence. And I had my students make claims for experiments, and I used to tell my kids, I enjoy being wrong. You know, I may have thought at the beginning of the experiment that, um, like experiment of aluminum foil and white paper and black paper on thermometers. I maybe thought the aluminum foil was going to absorb the most heat because I know that I put stuff in aluminum foil all the time, to keep things hot or keep things cold. So maybe that's my thinking. But actually, that the black paper actually absorbs more heat. Like I'm wrong. I can change my thinking, which is always a great opportunity. And that's modeling to students that teachers are lifelong learners. Or we don't know anything. We're not the gatekeepers of information. That again, I enjoy being wrong, and it's okay to be wrong. All right. Anybody else? Oh, designing solutions. Oh, yes, that is yeah, that's a great one. So that one is really tough because again, you nailed it on the head there, Lindsay. It brings in that engineering aspect, and teachers are going to say, I'm not an engineering teacher, and everything. But just know that those are the ETS, that they are coupled with content. Okay. So if they are asking for like a biological solution, you know, your design should be, a problem, is dealing with something in biology, life science, that your solution should be related to life science. And that's a great I was in assessment committees last week, and there was a great way that they came up with a way to assess that and look at solutions. So it's very it was a very interesting way of doing it, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that one is a tough one because you're like, oh, I don't want to. I'm not an engineering teacher. I'm not, you know. But again, just know that it is coupled with content. So that could be, your base, your grounding um, foundation with that. And in full transparency, I will tell you that looking back on my teaching, the one that I was weak on was developing and using models, because I think I was really good at having kids develop models, but then I wasn't good at having them using the model. Like we make this model, we do all this, but then we never did anything with it. So that's one point that I was like, I could have done better on that front. Everything is good, like get out, doing drawings and doing all that stuff is me coming from not an artist background, but having kids show their thinking, but then again, not doing anything with it was something that I could have done better. Okay, so let's talk about these practices more explicitly. So they are dimension one when we're talking about three dimensions of science. They are dimension one. Okay? Our science and engineering practices. And if I use SEP, that's what I mean. The science and engineering practices. So sometimes I flip up and just use a lot of jargon. Um, so there are 8 of them. Okay? And these describe the major practices that scientists and engineers use. And they describe what students do with learning the content. And you'll see all the performance expectations do start out with a science and engineering practice. The students will develop a model. The students are going to design, plan, and conduct an experiment. Okay? It's not from the teacher. It doesn't say the teachers are going to do this. It's not anybody else, any other stakeholder. It is on the student. So that is clear, explicit language that this responsibility is on the student. They were previously incorporated with the 2014 science standard. Okay? Remember that they were standard 1 for all the grade levels, and then they were incorporated with content for those performance indicators. So even though they've been around, quote unquote, for a while, we still need them, and we still use them, and still can learn more. So again, there are 8 of them, and we already talked about strengths and weaknesses with them. And one thing that I'm going to reiterate is that there is one that is assigned for on the standards document for state assessment purposes. Okay? Please do not let that limit any classroom instruction. So, for example, if the assigned SCP and the standards document for that performance expectation, and the performance expectation is that 3-dimensional statement, color-coded statement, that sometimes people call it a standard, but we're shifting our language and calling it a performance expectation. Because again, it is an expectation. Say the assigned one is let's see, planning and carried out investigation. So that's the assigned one for state assessment purposes. But if you're in a classroom, of kids, are they going to let you stop at maybe just the planning part? No, they're not going to okay, we planned this and then we're done. No, they're not letting you get away with that, right? You want to do the investigation. You're going to, get data on that and flesh it out. And then how did you think about how did you even get to planning that investigation? Oh, we asked questions. What did we ask questions about? We might have asked questions about a phenomenon. And so again, just don't let that assigned SCP limit your class, and don't let anything on the standards document limit classroom instruction. Okay, that is for mainly for state assessment purposes of limits that we can assess. Like you'll see on the state, if the assigned SCP is planning and carrying out investigation, that is the only SCP we can assess at a state level with that on that performance expectation. So when we talk about grouping these practices, that I kind of alluded to this flow chart previously, is that we can kind of group them into three ways: investigating practices, sense making practices, and critiquing. Now, this is not the only way, okay? There's just a way to do it. So there are other models out there, okay, pun intended. But there are other models out there that group them differently. So this is just one way to do it. So with three-dimensional science, we always we want to start off with a phenomenon. And then we get into these investigating practices of asking questions. We can plan and carry out investigations. We might use mathematical and computational thinking. Okay. It's not always present because a lot of times we do a lot of qualitative observations, especially in K through 5. Okay. That we're doing more or less, higher, lower, those kind of things rather than actually computing. So we'll do the experiment, okay? Or sorry, do an investigation based on the questions we ask, maybe about a phenomenon, okay? And then we're going to get data from it, okay? And that's where the sense making practice comes in. Okay, what is this data? What is this data telling us? How can this data show us what is going to, if this investigation continues? And how can we predict what's going to happen in the future? So they're developing and using models. We need that data to develop a model, analyzing and interpreting data in a chart, table, choosing an appropriate type of graph to use, and then using that data to construct our explanation. And then we can use these critiquing practices, engage in argument from evidence, and obtaining, evaluating, communicating information. And those kind of just naturally flow into the other practices. Because sometimes to even meet a performance expectation, you will have to engage in multiple science and engineering practices to get there. And we want students to have experience with a variety of science and engineering practices to get to that performance expectation. And even, just like I said, that doesn't limit classroom instruction, so you can go beyond that performance expectation. And now, this is, of course, it seems like a utopia, ideal world, right? Going through all these practices every single time. Okay? But know that that's not necessarily the expectation. Okay? It might not be, again, it might not be appropriate to do mathematical and computational thinking on this one, on this investigation. It might not be appropriate to analyze and interpret data or develop a model. And so, and then here with data, sometimes you can kind of almost, you can, if you don't have time for, investigation, it's always okay to give students data. That is okay. Okay? They can give students data. Yeah. Yeah, totally feel it. Yeah, I love it. It's great. Every time I put it up, people are like, thank you. Again, maybe seen a way to group them. You're like, okay, what are the commonalities with these practices? And again, don't think again because you're like, okay, I got to go through every single one every single time. That's going to be a lot, and pacing and time and everything that is always in the back of our head. So just know that it is okay to give students data, okay, and have them make sense of the data. Like, you know what, somebody did this, um, and you can analyze and interpret that. And a great site for that is kind of more, I would say, more secondary, is going to data nuggets. And you just can type in data nuggets in a browser, and then you will get lots of data, and they're constantly updating data as well. Um, so it's just open source. So if you're looking for something like, okay, I need something and I don't have time to do an experiment, or hey, it's not realistic in a classroom setting to do an investigation on this. Oh, thank you, Emily. Um, and you can always give them the data. And then engaging the argument from evidence. We talked about the CER model, and there are some others, out there as well. Um, and of course, obtaining, evaluating, and communication with those critiquing. So just another way that these, so this is like more like the flow chart. Um, but some people are more of a linear person, so showing you different types of models. That this is just then a linear format. Anyone want to share reactions, comments about the grouping?
The thing I notice is the number of the practices, they don't go in order of what they are.
Yes, that's a great notice, right? It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Absolutely, it's a great notice. Okay. Yeah, it's grouping them based on an instructional sequence. Well, how can we do this? How this flow instructionally.
I just think it does such a great job, this and the flowchart, of putting these practices into a context. Like, what am I really asked? Like, what's the purpose behind this practice? And like you said, not every experience is going to incorporate every single one. It's not like the scientific method where we start at step 1 and finish at step 8. But I think this helps teachers contextualize, like, okay, I'm doing this. This is part of this PE because it's helping students make sense of what's going on, or investigate or critique.
That they might have to do this practice first to get. I'm leading them up to, that, and that's a great, you know, having observations, 4.0 rubric observations, and everything of like, and really like lesson planning. Like, okay, this is going to be the flow, and this is the reasoning behind what I'm doing, and it's not just we're just not fully jumping into planning an investigation that the kids have no connection to. It's like, okay, let's just do this. And the kids are like, whoa, what's this? What's going on? And it makes it more engaging for them. So they're asking questions, and then they're doing investigations based on their questions, that they're going to be more engaged, and they are going to be like, oh, well, we found out I had that question. That was an answer. I got my question answered. And again, not all the questions, this goes back to the vertical articulation, that not every question that the students are going to ask is a testable question, because sometimes it might be a more of an informational question that they might find out through obtaining, evaluating, communicating information more, so like, they're like, well, we're not answering my question. Like, we're not answering your question yet. Like, we're getting there, we're getting through these processes. Um, and that's a struggle for lots of people to, come up with a testable question, even adults.
Yeah, Brent, that was a really like big aha for me this year. And it's our curriculum in CCSD in the elementary, um, gives students phenomenon, asks them to generate questions in every single lesson. It's kind of the cadence of the lesson, but that's not necessarily the SEP in obviously in every performance expectation. But I think realizing that we teachers need guidance on guiding students to ask testable questions, and even sorting, like, okay, here's all of our questions. Can we sort these into testable and non-testable? That was just like, oh, yeah, I can totally help teachers with this.
Yeah. It's a really great strategy is doing like a driving question board with that. And again, having those like protocols in place, like with that, like everybody's question is valid and there's space for everybody's question and stuff like that. And and again, if it is a more informational question, you can put that responsibility onto the student. Like, we don't, that's not really an investigative question, but if you want to do some research, and then I can give you some time in class and you can share what you did, what you found. And so putting that onto them a lot of times, like, oh, okay, yeah, like I can do that. I can, I'll do that. Because again, we are not the gatekeepers of information, right? And so students can go out and do research and obtain information and do that. And again, share with the class. All right, I'm gonna put in the link to the vertical articulation in the chat. It's going to our instructional resources page, and then it's the first heading on there for the science and engineering practices, and they're split up by grade band. So the grade bands are K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and then K through 12. 9 through 12. And again, your students might be in a grade band below. They could be, in a grade band above. Okay. And this is a great opportunity. I recently had a conversation with the teacher effectiveness office, and because I was telling her what I did in my classroom. So we actually developed our SLO around a science and engineering practice. And so that's a great way. Like you're not necessarily bound by content, you're bound by the practice. And you can still develop that practice throughout your SLO cycle. That it's not necessarily just like heavy content that is, hey, this is a practice. Okay. And if you get kids moved up, to that grade band or, move them up to your grade band if they're below or, moving them up, that is amazing. That's going to, they can learn about, the stages of mitosis. They can memorize that, and everything. But if you're moving them up in their thinking and the way they approach things, that's going to really, really grow them in science. So it's a great opportunity. Now, when we talk about this, we can increasing engagement with students. We can think about two instructional pathways. So we can think about more of the information frame, where the teacher is focused on disseminating information. The students are focused on knowing or memorizing that information. That science is an established body of fact, and that our classroom assessments focus on the right answer. And I'm going to challenge you to make a shift to a more sense-making frame. And the sense-making frame is where teachers are focused on developing conceptual understanding. Students are focused on understanding that science is a way to make sense of something, and that classroom assessments can use evidence to support conclusions and generalization. And so we're going to go from knowing about to figuring out. And my best example of this is anybody, I know a bunch of people probably here watched Saved by the Bell growing up. Okay. And we had the character Jessie Spano. Right. And we will call her the conscientious student of the group. All right. And there was a scene with her, and they were in a history classroom, and Jessie, being the conscientious student that she is, they were like reviewing for a test, and she was writing down every single thing that the teacher was saying, to the point where her smoke was coming off of her pencil and paper. That's a little exaggerated, but like she was feverishly writing down everything that was coming out of the teacher's mouth. Now, a lot of stuff that we say is important, right? But we are not, again, these gatekeepers of all the information. Like people don't have to listen to every single little thing that comes out. Okay? And again, we know that again, science is changing, right? The more information that we have, that our understanding is changing. Right? Like we grew up, having 9 pizzas, but now with the planets, but now we just get nachos for the Pluto, got declassified as the planets. Right? So that was something different. And so this change is hard because again, pun intended, we do not have a good model to go off of. Because we were taught with that information frame, direct instruction model, almost all the time, lecture, I'm disseminating information, and then I'm expected to regurgitate that information back on a test, an assessment. We were focused on, okay, I gotta study this, I gotta study this, it's mine, I have to do, and so making that shift is going to be difficult. It's gonna feel weird, okay, from being that sage on a stage, to being a facilitator, you know, and knowing that we don't have to have all the answers as a teacher. If someone asks us, an equation for thermodynamics, okay, we don't have to have that information directly on recall. And so we again put that responsibility onto students, okay? And say, we can look it up together. Let's find out. Let's look at this. Okay. So it takes a lot of pressure off of us because then we're going to use our education and our experiences to design learning opportunities for students in the classroom. What can I do to, involve them in the learning process while I have these students here? And so it's a shift. And again, it's putting that responsibility onto students. So we talked about it's going to be a shift for teachers. It's going to be a shift for students because it's no longer a sit and get type of thing. Okay? They're going to be actively engaged in the learning, and they might not find out the answers when they want to find out the answers. Okay, that's going to be a process. We might get little bits of information at a time. And it's going to be a shift for parents. Okay, because well, are you just going to tell them? I can imagine them saying, why can't you just tell them what they need to know? Well, I can and I will, but I'm going to do it in a way that involves them in the process. And then it's a shift for administrators. Okay? That a three-dimensional science classroom is going to look differently, than a 2014 one that was based on the 2014 standards. Okay? And that it might not be in my instructional sequence where I am doing direct instruction. That I am a facilitator. They are in groups. They are working. They are talking. There might be a little noisy, but there is such a thing as good noise. If they're being productive and having all that and talking and everything, that's great. And we want the students' brains to go home hurting more than ours because they should be doing the thinking. They should be figuring everything out. They should be, and I'm providing feedback or I'm providing them, a pathway to get to that ultimate goal of, of learning and understanding and answering a question, and everything. But I'm not, the one doing all the thinking and providing all the information and doing all the talking and doing everything. So again, it is a shift because again, we don't have we were not taught this way, so it is going to be a shift and it's going to take time because as we're going through, they're going to be like, okay, well, they've only had experience this past year with 2021. Okay, I don't see them till 2 years later. Okay, what can I expect for them? Or they missed this content. I have to, do some scaffolding back of like, this is new content for this grade level because through the sequence they missed it and didn't get an opportunity to learn it. And I love the comments in the chat about the previous slide. I apologize. I didn't mention that about ELA, connection to ELA and social studies. Yeah, it's all in there. There's historical thinking skills, all right, for social studies are great. We are working with our personalized learning team. They work with the social studies colleagues in developing those learning progressions for the historical thinking skills. And know that we are in collaboration with them currently to develop the learning progressions for the science and engineering practices. So that is something that is coming down the pipeline. Yeah. Go ahead, Emily. Go ahead, Emily.
I didn't mean to raise my hand, but I will say that so the science team, we have Amy and I that are K-5, but then also our 6 through 12 colleagues are presenting together at CES, at the Charleston Educator Symposium, to administrators specifically on this shift and what administrators should expect when they walk into and hopefully support when they go into science classrooms and see maybe a little organized chaos, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. The kids are up, moving around, they're engaged, and everything. I couldn't want more from, and everything. That's what, I think I secretly would have, I did for some content, we got to go outside and do all this, but I secretly wish that maybe that's how I would have learned more, through engaging and investigation and stuff. And so I'm going to make sure that my students in my classrooms have that experience, because we always kind of secretly a little bit teach like how we wanted to be taught, a little bit like I would have really, loved doing this with the content. And then also, Emily, you can mention there is the administrator's course, which I know you're enrolled in, as well to help support administrators in elementary and secondary classrooms as well. So you can do a little plug and you're like, this is a wonderful course and everything. That's great. All right, so what we're going to do next is we are going to watch a video, and I'm going to have you, I'm going to assign you a science and engineering practice. And Emily, if you will drop in that link of the um, the debrief, the Google Doc um, presentation, the Google slide presentation, and I'm going to assign you a slide number. And I'm going to show you the video. And then what I want you to do is to take note on how you saw that science engineering practice in the video. Okay, so we're looking for evidence in our of our science and engineering practice in the video. And I did this completely random. So Scott, did Scott come back? Perfect. All right, Scott, I'm going to have you do slide number 1. And yours is asking questions and defining problems. Miss Cola, I'm going to have you do slide number 2, developing and using models. Heather, I'm going to have you do work on slide number 3, which is planning and carrying out investigation. Emily, I'll have you on slide number 4, analyzing and interpreting data. Lindsay, I'm gonna have you on slide number 5. I'm going to take slide number 6, constructing explanation and designing solutions. I'll take that one. And Stephanie, if you will take slide number 7, which is engaging in argument from evidence. And then I will take slide number 8 as well, which is obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. Does anybody need me to repeat which slide they're at? So I'm going to play the video. If you have your cameras on, you can go ahead and turn your cameras off just to prevent any buffering issues, and I will turn my camera off as well. And I'm going to play the video, and then you're going to think about where you saw evidence of that science and engineering practice in that video. And then I also provided space for if you wanted just to make any other notes about the practice in general, that you can make those notes as well. Or if you saw connections to other practices, okay? You can make those notes as well. Here we go.
For clues to what's been killing starfish up and down the West Coast. The mysterious die-offs were first noticed in Washington State. That's where KCT.
All right, just checking in the chat. Can you let me know, or thumbs up or raise your hand if you are able to hear that? All right, excellent. Just wanted to check before we got too far.
Scientists are searching for clues to what's been killing starfish up and down the West Coast. The mysterious die-offs were first noticed in Washington State. That's where KCTS Seattle has been partnering with the environmental public media project, EarthFix, to get to the bottom of the epidemic. Special correspondent Katie Campbell reports.
Something strange is happening in Seattle's waters. Laura James was one of the first to notice. She alerted scientists when starfish began washing up on the shores near her home.
And I thought, you know what? This is getting a little too close for comfort. I need to go see what's going on, and I need to document it.
As a diver and underwater videographer, James was equipped to do something. She decided to take her camera to a spot popular among both divers and starfish. These pilings are usually covered with a rainbow of starfish. On a recent dive, James discovered a scene from a horror film.
There were bodies everywhere, and they were just like these splats. To me, it always looked like someone had taken a laser gun and just zapped them, and they just vaporized.
Starfish, also known as sea stars, are wasting away by the tens of thousands. Not just in Puget Sound, but up and down North America's Pacific coast. And nobody knows why.
I've been diving out here for almost 24 years, and people always ask me, do you see any big difference between, now and when you started? And I've seen some subtle differences, but this is the change of my lifetime. We've had small occasional die-offs here and there, but it's not like this. It's not a mass mortality event. I'm just a diver. I need to find out what the scientists know.
But scientists have also been wondering what's going on. They first started noticing sick and dying starfish on Washington's Olympic Peninsula last summer. Reports have since surfaced from Southern California to as far north as Alaska. At first, only a certain species, known as the sunflower star, seemed to be affected. Then it hit another species, then another. In all, about a dozen species of sea stars are dying along the west coast. It's been coined sea star wasting syndrome, and it's also been reported at sites along the east coast. But researchers say it's too early to connect these outbreaks.
You know, I was surprised too that the crabs weren't just...
Ben Miner is a biology professor at Western Washington University. He studies how environmental changes affect marine life. Today, his team is collecting sea stars at Mukilteo, Washington, just north of Seattle.
The population of sea stars is, they're quite abundant at that site. And so on the pilings, there were healthy sea stars, but we were also coming across arms and piles of deteriorated sea stars and individuals that were twisted.
The divers are searching for stars showing symptoms, as well as the ones that appear healthy.
The experiments are infectiousness experiments where we take individuals that have signs of the syndrome and we put them in tanks with individuals that don't have signs.
Then they closely watch the progress of the disease. First, the stars twist their arms into knots, and sometimes lesions form on their skin.
One of them was very sick, and the other two individuals started ripping themselves apart. The arms just crawl away from the particular body.
You heard that right. The arms crawl in opposite directions until they tear away from the body and their insides spill out. And unlike most starfish, the arms don't regenerate. Stars that came in with symptoms died within 24 hours.
Interestingly, though, I didn't see the individuals that were exposed to those dying individuals show symptoms any more rapidly than individuals in the other tanks.
So being in the same tank with a dying starfish doesn't seem to accelerate the disease. Divers recently returned to Mukilteo to find that most of the starfish there have died. But we still don't know how they're catching the illness or where it comes from. Could an infectious pathogen from the other side of the world have hitched a ride on ocean-going ships? Or could it be something larger, like climate change or ocean acidification?
So this is a healthy Pycnopodia, no signs of lesions.
Drew Harvell is coordinating the research into answering those questions. She's a marine epidemiologist from Cornell University who is studying at the University of Washington's Friday Harbor Labs in the San Juan Islands.
Got that one.
Harvell is sending these samples to Cornell. There they will be analyzed for viruses as well as bacteria and other protozoa. The first step, she says, is to figure out the distinct characteristics that identify the disease.
We know that organisms get sick, they get bacteria, they get viruses, just like humans do. They get the cold and the sniffles, but it's a lot harder to see it happening when they're under the ocean.
Scientists worry that the loss of sea stars could have far-reaching ecological consequences. That's because they're voracious predators. They gobble up mussels, clams, sea cucumbers, and even other starfish.
Because these are ecologically important species. When you lose this many sea stars, it will certainly change the seascape.
They certainly suggest that those ecosystems are not healthy. To have diseases that can affect that many species, that widespread is I think, just scary.
If there's a silver lining, it may be that studying this outbreak could shed light on how marine diseases spread.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's a question Laura James is hoping citizen scientists can help answer.
The big problem we had here is that we didn't have a baseline. The starfish got sick when we noticed. Wouldn't it be cool if we could show this in real time and show the spread and the changes in real time?
James and her dive buddy built a website for tracking posts to social media sites with the hashtag #SickStarfish.
Take a picture of any starfish you find when you're out tide pooling or just walking on the beach and hashtag it #SickStarfish. And then we can look at it when it pops up on the map, or if we're not sure, we can send it off to the scientists and they can take a look at it. We may not be able to stop it and we may not be able to fix it, but we need to be aware so that we can recognize it when it happens again.
All this research may be paying off. Scientists think they're honing in on the cause and hope to make an announcement in a few months.
New experiments started in Washington state this week to test possible infectious agents.
All right. Go ahead and continue writing down information on your slide number. And if you are already finished and you want to look at your colleague, and what I'm going to ask here in a few minutes, we're going to go through these. And if you will just share, unmute or type in the chat, just share what you wrote down and share anything else that you wanted to share about seeing your practice in the video.
Heather had a question in the chat about when was that reported? When was that report
That
found?
is a great question. Let me see. Yeah, because it did say an announcement was coming.
Scientists are searching for clues to
That was 10 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You're so welcome. Give me a couple more minutes and finish up, and I'm going to ask you to share either in the chat or you can unmute and share about where you saw the practice in the video and anything additional that you want to add. let's go ahead and let's start off with number 1. And if Scott, if you want to either unmute or type in the chat, where did we see asking questions and or defining problems in the video and any other notes?
Some of the questions like refer to like what is the main cause of this die off? Is it from like the ships coming? Is it from climate change? So that's some of the questions, and how do they solve it?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, they're asking what is killing sea stars? Again, how can we help? How can we help with that? And then just other notes that I made, that engineers also ask questions. So it's not just their scientists that ask questions. Okay. And that is connected to all other practices. Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.
Ms. Cola, slide number 2, you had developing and using models.
The models I saw were when they took the sick and the healthy starfish and put them in the same tank to see how the disease transmits. Also, they talked about it, but they didn't really show like making a model of progression of symptoms from when they first start to when they ultimately die, and asking the public to show and take pictures of sick starfish along the coast. And I put that also relates to standard number 8, obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information, because it's getting the community involved too.
So they were having that map, developing that map of the location of it. And then using that hashtag sick starfish. Okay, getting like you said, getting the community involved, that citizen science, right? That scientists can't be everywhere. We have to rely on people that are in these communities, that are out seeing something. And if you see a sick starfish, they want you to report it, so they can update their map. Awesome, thank you for that. You see that those progressions of the symptoms. Yeah, they didn't show it, but they were going to do a model of that. And again, just other notes that we talked about before, that developing these models again are more than just those physical models. Okay, and that again is like the developing and using the model, and that's just a note for me. Awesome, thanks so much, Ms. Cola. Slide number 3, planning and carry out investigation.
All right, sorry, I wrote a lot. Can you hear me?
No, it's fine. I love it.
I just like the way that they started small and then went larger. So if the videographer noticed the problem first, they're starting the planning there local. Then they went to local scientists, and then they went from there, collect more information, and went to the collegiate level. Just using everybody to help out and try to figure out what's going on. And the last part was the building of the website, like you said on the second slide about the 6 starfish, to create the awareness in helping with that local research. And that's why I wanted to know how long ago that was, to see, because I had never heard of it before, but I also don't live on the West Coast, so that might be why.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And again, a lot of that kind of like the phenomenon that you use might be a little out of reach, like that's what's presented maybe in an instructional material or curriculum that school districts adopted. So you can make it more South Carolina, make it more Southeast, make it more regional, and everything is a great opportunity as well. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. I love all your notes. And just things to add, and I just worded things differently. That they were doing the observations of the sea stars, and that they did they did different experiments of showing how the disease did end up spreading. And that also other notes that I made notes of, this includes elements from other practices. Okay? And again, a common theme that you're seeing, like all these practices are interwoven, that it's hard to just do one isolated practice that they're all interwoven. And that carrying out investigations, you know, could be more than just experiments or investigations. That you could end up doing field studies and systematic observations of things. One thing that the one teacher that I did do lots of hands-on stuff, I had him in 7th grade and in 10th grade. And in 7th grade, he did have a field biology class for freshmen, but he banded birds. So he had huge nets set up during certain times of the year, and would the birds would go and be in those nets, and then he would get the birds out and see if they were banded, and if they were not banded, that he would band them, and he would count up how many the types of birds, all the different types of birds that were in the area. And then we did lots of stuff outside for biology. Like we're fortunate to have a land lab next to our high school. And so literally he would take us out there and be like, okay, it's your responsibility to show me examples of different types of fungi or, stuff like that. Like we had to go and show him what we found, which is really great. And obviously a great impact because I still have those memories of being out there with him. All right, slide number 4, Emily.
Oh, that's me. So I took a note of I really like how they incorporated like the citizen science, and we've talked about it a little bit before because like we've said, it all kind of bleeds together. But so they were using everyday citizens to collect some data, tracking where people were noticing the sea stars using that hashtag. They were looking at the map and also the quantity of sea stars. And it was trying to help them kind of hone in on the cause. Also, the other notes that I took were that like this starfish dying off randomly, suddenly, without explanation is the phenomena, and the questions that come up with that is like, what is killing them? Why are they dying? How is it spreading? So I thought it was just a really good example of a phenomena, a real life phenomena that a teacher could use to generate questions.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. And again, just putting stuff in different ways. Again, that's all, making sense of those experiments and observations. Okay, what's going on? How are they dying? What's going on? How are we tracking it, and everything. And then, and I mentioned this before as well, that especially in elementary, we use a lot of qualitative observations. Just know it doesn't always have to be numbers. That could be observational models. And then a great way to do that is using digital tools. I already mentioned the data nuggets to get some data as well. But even using data tools, either like Google or any other applications to help students make those graphs and everything, and showing how they can use that data from an Excel spreadsheet, can generate a graph, an appropriate type of graph from. So that's great. Lindsay, slide number 5.
Hello. Well, I know what did I write on this? Let me pull it up. Let's go to the most fun part first, where I say, sorry, I'm terrible at flipping back and forth to Zoom.
You're good.
And all of my just where is he? Where is he? It just happened. I know, like the suspense for me to talk, right? Okay, so star at the bottom, math / computational thinking equals not Hamlet's strength. We are by nature an art ELA girly, but we are trying our best.
Okay, good.
Having said that, so feel free to take your expertise and jump right in and stop me.
No, you're
if
good.
You feel necessary. But I just noticed that they were using computer technology to track them. in real time, and they had the website tracking system. It showed her with like a little formula equation type piece of paper, and when they were showing that, they said that there was some sort of disadvantage for like that they didn't have baseline data for calculations. I don't know how that would fit into everything, but yeah, that's about it.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for stepping out of your box.
Would you like to add on anything? Would anyone like to add on anything? Let's talk moves. Let's move the talk. Anyone like to add on?
Yeah.
No.
It's just that, you know, sometimes again, we don't always see, it's like you didn't mention them, you know, writing on paper and figuring stuff out. Like you might not actually like see the computational thinking, you know, like explicitly in that video, just because it probably happens in the background. You know,
Okay.
like,
I understand they were like doing the experiment trying to get them sick and everything, but I didn't watch
yeah,
it again.
there's lots of that going in the background again with that website tracking system. And they're, you know, being updated in real time, but they are getting numbers, you know.
Yeah. Collecting data.
Yeah.
Okay.
And great opportunities, again, to use digital tools if you are not, you know, not have comfort level with that. And again, letting students decide, you know, when they're designing the experiment, whether qualitative or quantitative data would be the best for that investigation. So that is great. Thank you
for
so
your
much.
add-on. I appreciate that.
No problem. I had number 6, constructing explanations and designing solutions. So I found that they were presenting tentative claims, you know, about what happened. You know, was it, again, go back to what Scott mentioned about, you know, what was it? Was it climate change? Was it these boats coming in from other areas? Um, and they were actively trying to construct an explanation for this. And then other notes, we made the connection to ELA earlier where we talked about this practice. That is very much, there's an ELA connection with your evidence-based explanations and your text-dependent explanations for constructing the explanations. And we also touched on the designing solution that, hey, this might be really challenging because, again, we're not engineering teachers, that that aspect might be a little difficult, but a lot of that deals with different constraints and criteria. So just know, of course, you know, we're in a classroom, we don't have every material available to us, you know, in the classroom. Like we are going to have, you know, some constraints with not only the materials, but you can also set in some constraints of, hey, if you wanted to budget and do different things, you can buy stuff, but you only have, you know, set a price, quote unquote, a price to materials that you know, you can only buy certain ones, or, you know, put in some constraints. Because again, just like in the real world, we all have constraints to what we can construct. You know, we have a budget, you know, that we have to build this for this amount of price and everything. So number 7 was Miss Stephanie, and you had a little update here, engaging the argument from evidence.
I think Stephanie either had technical difficulties or may have had to jump off for a moment or forever. So
yeah, no problem. So she said in hers, again, looking at those possible reasons for the die-off, that maybe the disease was brought over from different ships of the world and maybe due to climate change. But again, it's hard because we don't know the answer at this time, and so engaging, you know, providing that answer is hard. But we can use all the evidence that we talked about before with the map. That again, they're still working on identifying the cause. And again, this other note is essential for identifying the best explanations and design solutions. So like, what is the best that we could do? And obviously with anything, there's going to be trade-offs. So what's the best solution? Or and again, that's one of those critiquing practices that we grouped under the critiquing practices that they are connected to the other practices. And then I had obtained, evaluating, communicating information. We're slide number 8. So the video itself is a form of communication that they are communicating, that because a lot of us didn't know about the sea star wasting, so that is a way to communicate information. And again, this idea of citizen science, I love using citizen science because again, scientists and scientists can't be everywhere and they're not walking the beach every day of every hour of every minute, seeing if sea stars wash up or not. So it's up to, and they encourage the public to use that hashtag. And it's other notes that again, I talked about that this is actually where a lot of scientists and engineers spend their time, obtaining, evaluating, communicating information. So a lot of students might be like, why are we reading so much and in science? But it's actually really powerful. That's where a lot of scientists, um, we spend our time. So communicating findings, doing like peer review, of evaluating, of course, applying for grants, at the university level, and of course at the district level. And we have to communicate this information to potential employers, and everything about our design. Any questions or any comments on any of those practices, about the video?
As we were going through, I was thinking that once they find the cause, there was other questions that popped up in my mind, like why did it affect that starfish first, that species, or what are the age of the starfish that are being affected? So it's kind of a circular, it's not finished, it's going on and on and on.
And I'm so happy that you saw that, because it's that same thing, like going back to Joe, Jimmy, and Jenna, like with that traditional scientific method, there was a stopping point. Like you stopped once you got your conclusion, there was a stopping point. But now, like, we want to have kids, okay, now what more questions do we have? Now that we know all this information, it's like you mentioned, Ms. Bola, like we know this information, but I want to know more. Like what now that I have more questions, about why this is happening. So keeping that curiosity going about, like it doesn't necessarily like have a stopping point. And it might have a stopping point, of course, like, maybe in the classroom, like instructionally, and everything. So we can, but yeah, engaging in that process and continually asking questions. All right, great. And as we're wrapping up here, okay, I got a short post assessment. If you will put that in the chat for me, Emily. And again, same question. All right. Again, the goal was hopefully we made steps forward in our thinking. And again, a lot of us were at 2s and 3s before. Let's see where we. And kind of going off what Ms. Cola said, like I'm gonna ask you, like, what more questions? What questions now do you have? And you can of course scan that QR code as well on your screen if that's easier. Perfect. Yeah, I did do a 5. Just the just to not limit your responses. So I did do a 5 on that one. And once you are finished responding, I'm just going to have you look at this quote. And on this quote, this is from Brett Molding, who was a writer of the framework for K-12 science education, which is the foundation document for our standards. Does anybody want to share a reaction, comment after reading this quote? There's like a yes, yes.
I just think it's such a it's a powerful example of like why we should be using phenomena in our classroom, and just the whole video application that you had us do today is such a nice way to see like how we can think about each one of the practices and how they're connected, both to our classroom and just in real life science.
Love it. Yeah. And Heather completely 100% agrees with the quote. She loves it. Great. And one thing that was I saw on the feedback form, are there continuation or advanced PDs that build on this topic? So yes, there will be. I'll be online on Wednesday with Charleston County doing the cross-cutting concepts. And then also I have sessions I can get with Emily and Amy on about building a phenomenon-based journey for elementary students. And I can also scale that to middle school as well, and everything. And then also there is I talked about the administrator Canvas course, but there's also an asynchronous Canvas course for teachers as well. And so in both of those, the administrator course and the teacher course, do have renewal credit attached to that. And there's the link to the professional learning opportunities page that we have. And we're currently always developing more, and we're going to provide this again asynchronously. That's why we're recording, and then we're going to record on Wednesday as well. And then we have a structures and function recording also that's going to go up at the same time. And then on top of that, I have a closed reading webinar that I did in the spring in conjunction with my other ELA counterparts. I have that recording that will be going up as well. So lots of asynchronous options. You're like, oh, I forget, or want other people in your building to have these opportunities that will be available to them as well.
And in CCSD, we also have I have a maybe a competing asynchronous course on the new standards that goes into the SCPs and CCCs. That's in Canvas. And if you're interested in that, it's kind of geared towards elementary, but my middle school teachers, I think you would definitely get a lot out of it if you were interested. It is in Frontline. This section closes like June 27th, but a new section will be opened up in July, and it's open all year long.
Awesome. And if you'll do me one more favor, Emily, if you will drop the OAS feedback link. So there's gonna be another form, and they'll kind of like forming lots of forms, but this is feedback for our office. So just like everybody has accountability, we have accountability of how impactful we're being in the field. And so this will go on to reports to the Education Oversight Committee. And so just like your Airbnb host, I consider the 4 a normal and everything. And thank you, Heather and Lindsay, for your great comments in the chat. I really appreciate it. And once you have completed that form, I will listen and linger for any questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And then so your listen and lingers won't be recorded, but I will of course listen and linger for any additional questions.